Thank you for joining us for today's PAVE Coffee Chat, Do What You Love. Please join me in welcoming our moderator for today's chat, Rachel Zsembery. Rachel is the Vice President of Bergmeyer, a design collaborative based in Boston and Los Angeles, where she directs design and strategy teams that research, develop, and implement experience-rich consumer environments. Sorry about that. A dynamic and creative leader, Rachel proves to her clients that they are well served by working with a design firm which thoroughly understands their business, can create a consumer engagement strategy and design vision that supports their corporate goals, and has the energy, commitment, and corporate backing to manage a global real estate portfolio. Rachel serves on the Bergmeyer Associates Inc. Board of Directors and is a member of the Shop Association Board of Directors, the Retail Design Institute, the chair of the Boston Society of Architects Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Network, and the chair of the Arlington, Massachusetts Redevelopment Board. At the conclusion of today's chat, we'll be hosting a brief Q&A. Please send in your questions using the Q&A button found at the bottom of your screen. Now I will turn it over to you, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Nikki, for the kind introduction, and to PAVE for having us all here today. I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 minute while I get this all ready to go. Perfect, here we go. So thanks everyone for joining us today for today's PAVE Coffee Chat series. And this time where there's a lot of movement in the industry as companies contract and grow and pivot to adjust to the situation we're all in, many people are faced with either planned or unplanned employment changes. These changes may seem daunting when you're initially faced with them, but they are really a great opportunity to recenter yourself and take the time to move forward with the goal of doing what you love. So I'm pleased to have 3 emerging professionals with incredible careers in front of them joining us here today to share with you what it's been like for them to explore new and unexpected opportunities at early stages in their career. So today we're going to talk about practicing with purpose. While the next steps in your career may not always follow a perfect linear path, because nothing in life does, it is still important for your career decisions to be grounded in a larger goal, plan, or purpose. Like a retail brand who may have launched with high hopes and big dreams, only to find that they need time and consumer feedback to figure out their brand ethos and how their values resonate with their customers, it can take time for you to figure out your own professional purpose. This does not mean that you have to know exactly where you want to be in 5 or 10 years down the road and what that company or job title will look like, but you should have an idea of what you're working towards. Having worked with countless brands who are in need of a strategic pivot, I have to say that the steps that are entailed in evaluating a professional pivot are not entirely different. For retailers, we might ask, what are you best known for and what's your corporate mission statement? For each of us, it's not that different taking the first steps to identifying your own professional purpose. I often start by asking people, what's your greatest accomplishment? What are you the proudest of? With the ultimate goal of being able to identify a personal mission statement or a mantra that you can always return back to when you're evaluating new opportunities. Ultimately, most of us have to answer this question, what are you here for? So I'll share my own personal mission statement and what I'm here for, followed by a couple steps that I've gone through to take me through it, and hopefully you'll find this useful. Then we're going to hear from other panelists. Personally, my mission is to facilitate each one of my clients and my colleagues in reaching their highest potential. Where I take the biggest satisfaction is working with a brand to absolutely nail the physical expression of the brand in the built environment, which allows them to form deeper connections with their customers. And in working with my colleagues, both inside and outside of Bergmeyer, my biggest satisfaction is helping them to discover their strengths that will allow them to reach their own professional goals. So how do you go about determining your values and aligning them with your career? I often find that the first step is in creating your vision. So for those of us who are retail designers, this is a skill that we have honed over time. Much like this pop-up store for Roots, which was designed to celebrate core heritage products with the goal of introducing the brand to consumers in a new geographic market, it's important to be very specific and targeted about communicating and illustrating your own vision through your all your collateral and all of your conversations. So how do you approach this? First, you need to actually take down the time to physically write down your goals. Investing in your goals and vision for your career means committing time, energy, and resources to identifying your goals. Next, you need to discover what inspires you, what fuels you, what makes you spring out of bed every morning. There's a pretty good chance that you're going to be much more invested in your career if it aligns with those things that inspires you. One that I think is really important is knowing your own value and your values. Before you can work to fulfill your vision for your career, you have to know how you uniquely contribute to your work every day, what you're specifically positioned to do in a way that nobody else can. And you need to be prepared to communicate your worth, because nobody's going to define that for you. You should also know your values, the principles that center and guide you and influence the things you do and do not want to do. And finally, you need to be open to change. As we know now more than ever, nothing in life is in a straight line, and you need to be open to recognizing when new opportunities present themselves. Next, we'll talk about nurturing your vision. So once you have that vision created, you need to find a safe place for experimentation. So the photo on the right is a pop-up that we did a year or two ago with Wrangler within the Fred Segal store in LA. It was an opportunity for Wrangler to position themselves as a fashion-forward brand while celebrating their storied heritage within the walls of a destination known for pushing the envelope with fashion for decades. The pop-up, the location, the timing, it all made this a great opportunity for Wrangler to experiment as a brand. Likewise, you should yourself be looking for partnerships, collaborations, and places to work that will allow you to experiment and grow. And as you experiment, there'll be times when the results just don't pan out the way you hoped. However, it's important to embrace failure and to learn from it. There's so much to be learned from intelligent risk-taking, and failure is really just opportunity in disguise. Next, you need to look for opportunities to take on tough challenges. To be prepared for opportunities, you should be willing to look for ways to improve, learn, and try things you've never tried before. I always say that when an opportunity arises that looks challenging, messy, and definitely not straightforward, that's when you put your hand up. You will learn the most about yourself, and you will have the opportunity to truly be memorable. In other words, you need to say yes. Each one of the ladies that we're going to hear from today has had an opportunity that she was unsure about, that pushed her outside of her comfort zone, and she had the confidence and the courage to say yes. And in every case, it opened new doors. So finally, you need to learn how to pitch those new ideas. Being able to articulate yourself is critical, not only in the practice of design, but in every practice of life. Finally, now more than ever, when many of us are struggling to juggle so many different demands on our time and our energy, it's important to examine your commitments. One of my mentors once challenged me to take this exercise on, which was absolutely life-changing, and I encourage all of you to try it. It's to list out in your life those things that are energy givers versus energy takers. Energy givers are those things that fuel you and re-energize you and give more than they take. And energy takers absolutely suck the life out of you. They take more than they give. So for some people, making a spreadsheet and organizing something might be an energy giver. And in other cases, it absolutely is the last thing they want to do. The important thing to know is that there will be energy takers required as part of your life, but your goal is to maximize the number of energy givers and minimize the number of energy takers in both your personal and professional life. And then to pair with the people that have the opposite energy takers as in from energy givers. So to continue the discussion about doing what you love, I'm going to turn it back over to Nikki, who's going to introduce our three panelists.
Thank you, Rachel. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. Gissela Teran is an interior designer based in Boston at Bergmeyer, whose work in retail, workplace, and multifamily design reflects effective design process strategies from concept development through documentation. Gissela's Passion for meeting her clients' goals is rooted in finding new perspectives and thoughtful solutions to enhance customer experiences in evolving spaces. She is also a member of IIDA, New England's membership committee, where she helps organize local events for the greater design community. Emily Shaw is 22 years old and just completed her bachelor's degree in interior architecture from Endicott College. Her career path has taken an unexpected turn due to the current pandemic and the social media platform TikTok. She is now using her degree to help others online with design ideas for their spaces. Aditi Thota is an associate product designer at Toast Inc., a restaurant point of sale and management company based in Boston, where she works under the employee cloud team that focuses on making payroll and account management intuitive for restaurant owners. She is a multifaceted designer who graduated with a degree in architecture and communication design from Carnegie Mellon University, where she was introduced to the world of human-computer interaction and found herself at the intersection of digital design disciplines. She firmly believes that an architectural education prepares individuals to be industry agnostic designers, systems thinkers, and futurists. Previously, Aditi worked at Gensler as a technical designer, primarily focusing on spatial visualization and strategy. She also worked with Touchwood Labs, a finalist at the TechCrunch Startup Battlefield, on their pitch deck before formalizing her role as a user experience designer. Now back to you, Rachel.
Thanks so much. So Emily, let's start with you if you don't mind. You've definitely had the opportunity to practice saying yes and experimenting with your professional goals in a very public platform. Can you tell us a bit about how you've been able to create a new space for yourself and creating your own niche as an interior designer following your recent graduation? Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
Yes. So I went to Endicott College in Beverly, Massachusetts. I went there for interior design, and I had a very set career path for myself. I wanted to work at a firm in Boston, and I was not going to accept anything else. And I put my eyes on one firm, and that was Gensler. I worked there with Aditi. And I was there for a full year. I absolutely loved it there. But then the pandemic hit, school was over. We didn't have a graduation, and I was no longer working in Boston. And so I had a lot of free time on my hands. And so I started playing around with different ways that I could do digital design. And something that I ended up doing was renovating my parents' house for them, because it was a very old-fashioned house, and they just so happened to be staying with our family for the time period. And so I decided to renovate it for them on a budget as well. And I shared it on my social platforms as a way to stay motivated and stay creative. And it ended up taking off for me, and I gained a large following. And so after that, I started doing other things in the design space through social media. So what I've been doing since then is sharing educational content on TikTok. So I've been sharing Interior Design 101 series. I've been doing design suggestions for my followers, and I've been doing designs for people digitally behind the scenes as well. And it's been a very unexpected journey. There's definitely a lot of things I had to say yes to. For me, one of the hardest things was signing on with new management and being in a contract and knowing that at least for the next year of my life, I will not be going back into a firm. And it was definitely hard to let go, because I was someone who had a very, very strict path ahead of me. So it was hard for me to let go of that, but I've found so many different rewarding experiences through being able to help people who typically wouldn't be able to pay for design services, and being able to inspire people to have design in their life, and also just to bring awareness to what the interior design or interior architecture profession is, because a lot of people view it as something a lot different than what it really is. So I've been having a very fun time maneuvering this whole new journey.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I love the idea that you mentioned here, that you really needed to understand what you were giving up in order to embrace what the opportunity was in front of you. Great, thank you so much. The next person that I'll introduce is Gissela. So Gissela, before you and I were colleagues, we actually met through PAVE. In fact, you had to say yes to several opportunities that took you outside of your comfort zone, even to get to the point where we met in person for the first time. So can you tell us a bit about how you came to be in your current position?
Yes, thank you, Rachel. I'm Gissela, as Rachel mentioned, and my entire journey kind of started back in college, where I was introduced through PAVE, and that was really how everything kind of just trickled from there. And how that truly started was I was given a sponsorship opportunity through PAVE to attend the NRF Big Show in New York City, which invites several students to really learn more about retail and really just getting more advice on your career and how people come from humble beginnings, and just hearing from the advice that they have that they run these companies. And it was really inspiring. And that's also where I learned that PAVE has scholarship opportunities. And at the time, I didn't really understand what that meant or who was involved. And so I was told about the Bergmeyer scholarship. And that's where I went home later after that day from the convention I started researching Bergmeyer and what that meant. And within the scholarship, one of the rewards from that is getting sent to Boston to meet with the individuals at the firm and just to learn more and to mentor and learn from their projects and who they are as a company. And I was a senior, and I went to Appalachian State University, which is in North Carolina. So having only been born and raised and lived in North Carolina, I always had the goals and dreams to move to a bigger city. I just didn't know how that would happen or how I'd get there, but I am a very determined person and very goal oriented. So really wanted to make sure that that would happen. And I won the scholarship and got sent to Boston to meet these wonderful people at Bergmeyer, where it just really clicked as far as who I am as a person and what I wanted in a profession that I really didn't think existed until I walked through those doors and I met with them. And it was shortly after that that I went after it, and I took my chance and went through the interview process. And from the moment that I came to Bergmeyer and to Boston, it was actually my very first time that I had ever been to Boston. And it was then that I decided that this is what I wanted to do. So from the moment of walking through those doors and being able to start my job with Bergmeyer and moving there was in a little bit of less than 2 months. So all of this, from being introduced from the scholarship to moving, was all within a 6 to 7 month period where I knew what my goals were. I just didn't know how or where they would end up going. So it was thanks to PAVE truly to have been sponsored through that event, to learn about the company, that then led me to start my career.
Great, thanks so much. And we are so thrilled to have you, Gissela. So next I'd like to introduce Aditi. So you and I actually were originally introduced through mutual contact in the architecture school at our mutual alma mater, Carnegie Mellon. And most recently, we've collaborated together to bring together a new equity, diversity, and inclusion firm resource guide through the Boston Society of Architects, which I'm so happy you said yes to. So ever since we first met, I've been really impressed with the interdisciplinary focus that you bring to retail strategy and design, specifically in merging the digital and the physical space. So could you tell us a little bit more about your background and how it's led to your current position?
Yeah, of course. So when I went to architecture school at Carnegie Mellon, similar to Emily, I assumed I was going to have a very linear trajectory. I would graduate from school, do the whole 5-year ordeal and become a licensed architect. But when I was in school, I realized that through like an architecture education, it's actually like a very diverse education, and it is very easy for you to overlap what you learn with other disciplines. And historically, that's how a lot of designers sort of evolved. Lots of architects are industrial designers and product designers. There was no specialized distinction. So I started taking a lot of classes under the Human-Computer Interaction School and got involved with UX, but I did not want to do myself a disservice and switch when I was in school. So I actually did go ahead and pursue architecture and, ended up having a pretty conventional job and I was mostly focused on visual design, and that's kind of when I realized that I genuinely really like synthesizing visual information. And when you go to architecture school, the one thing people focus on is sort of, the spatial manifestation of your idea, but not about how it's super imperative to actually make information really clear. And you also learn how to communicate with different stakeholders. And I think that skill in itself is very versatile and applicable to many different fields. But yeah, when I was, switching from architecture to product design, it was definitely not easy. There were definitely times when I was like, I don't know if this is possible or if this is the right decision for me. I was shadowing UX designers and talking to a lot of different architects who switched to product design. And as a result, found myself, in the startup world. And if you had asked me if I would be doing that 6 months ago, the answer would definitely be no. So it's crazy how things worked out. And then, yeah, eventually after I got comfortable working at a startup, I was applying for full-time jobs and I ended up at Toast. So yeah, that's my journey.
Great. Well, thank you all for sharing your story with us. So I'm going to throw out a couple of questions and I'd love for you guys just to jump in and we'll see where the conversation takes us. So the first question I have is, one of the things that I think has really impressed me about all three of you is how you have really faced your fears and uncertainty and jumped in with both feet, which is something that often people are held back by in their professional careers. So in getting to where you currently are and knowing what you have ahead in your future, what are some of the biggest fears that you've had to overcome with setting out in that career path? And what's really been the biggest motivator to you guys in moving forward? Anyone like to start?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
With my journey specifically, I remember applying, and one of the things that I had to have the conversation with myself and my friends and family was moving to a different state and city where I had never been before just going once. And also learning what that meant for me as relocating, not knowing anybody, but also how did that translate into what I wanted for myself and my career. And though that is a big obstacle, I think the positives and what you want for yourself always outweigh the negatives. So I took the chance and really went through with it. And I think the best advice, especially during these times, is that if you are looking for a job or if you're unsure if it's a relocation or a different city, or if that's still one of your main goals, and maybe during this pandemic, that may not be an option right now. But just going through that entire process of, is it worth it? Is it scary? Should I do it? I think that just really having faith within yourself it's doing yourself a disservice not trying to figure that out for yourself. Because there's always going to be, even in your professional and personal life, that if you're doing something that you're unaware of, it's always a little scary. But I think something that I really like to live for is that if it doesn't scare you, it's not worthwhile, in that sense that you're doing something that will help you grow. And even with fears in general, I'd like to say that it's always about how you react to things. And to what Rachel mentioned earlier, it's even with mistakes or failure, you embrace it and you try to turn it into a positive. And I think my biggest motivator through that is I learned that I absolutely love where I live. And I can't believe that I hadn't been to Boston prior. And it's one of my favorite cities, and got to meet some of my closest friends, even in my personal life, through work. And I see myself here for the long haul. So I think what really motivates me with that is to find a place that you love to work that will help you personally and professionally. And just working with awesome clients and to help fulfill their goals as well is what motivates me.
Thanks so much, Gissela. Anyone else want to take a crack at that one?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Emily.
So for me, I guess the scariest part, obviously besides not being able to be in a firm for a while was knowing if I would make money or not, because I didn't know anything about this new industry that I was being basically thrown into. And you can never really know what kind of income will come if you haven't like planned that set life for yourself. So for me, for a long time, it was that debate of, do I take my traditional path and know exactly what's ahead of me, or do I do this new avenue that everyone's telling me is a great opportunity, but I don't understand it yet, and I don't know if it will actually be a good opportunity or if I'm being too ambitious with this. And so I guess my advice would be to just take that opportunity, because now I obviously am comfortable. I just moved out this weekend and you never really know like what opportunities will come your way and how good they are until you actually try them out. So yeah.
That's great. And Aditi, you're in a similar situation in that this is your first time really in a product design type of role. So there must have been some fear and trepidation going into that as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think especially when you go to school for very specialized majors, there's always there's like some sort of like stigma that comes with, you know, not pursuing like a very conventional career in that field. So I would definitely, it's actually pretty simple advice, but talk to people in your field. Chances are they're probably going through the same experiences, wanting to transition careers or, you know, combine different interests. I think I really benefited from that. I reached out to so many ex-architects who had made the switch. And it was weird because, you know, it's like kind of we're sharing a sense of community because we all went through the same transition, but no one knew about it because no one talks about that in school. Like only the people who are sort of following the conventional trajectory are very vocal about their opinions. So you honestly just never know. But that's actually one of the first things I would suggest. And number two is just not being afraid to learn new tools. I think when you go to school for something specific, people almost like underestimate themselves. They're like, oh, I can only do these like set of 5 to 10 things that I have learned in school. Anything beyond that is probably, you know, just not valuable to me. But just, you know, go get online, watch YouTube videos, watch tutorials. And also if you're trying to transition careers, hear what people have to say. I think like that's always like a good start.
Great. Thanks so much for that.
Yeah.
So we talked, you know, in thinking about transition and about moving and pivoting to stay valued, to stay relevant in the industry, and to again align with what you love. There's a correlation definitely between personal and career fulfillment and retail brands who need to do that, especially right now, to continue to stay relevant and valued by their customers, even when they're faced with potential failure. And especially when they're faced with potential failure. So I would ask you what retail brands you most admire for their commitment to that type of intelligent risk-taking and pivoting, even when they might be faced with failure. And Gissela kicked us off. So maybe if Emily, do you want to maybe kick us off on this one?
Sure. So I guess what I would say is, for me personally, the brands that have been inspiring me recently are the ones who are willing to dive into the new social media that is taking over, basically, because especially now in a pandemic, not many people can go to physical environments, and some brands have really used that push to transition into a way that they can still share what they're selling and what their goals are through digital media, as opposed to just the physical space, and some haven't. So I think some great brands that I've actually personally been working with recently is I've been working with Lowe's and Lowe's is definitely an older brand, and they could have totally chose to just stay as a brick and mortar type of shopping experience, but they are starting to work on their digital presence and connecting with designers on social media to share what they are selling. So I think just the brands that are really trying to dive into this new experience heads on instead of being hesitant about it are definitely ones that are inspiring me.
Great, thank you. Aditi?
These aren't brands that are, specifically changing strategies or switching up gears as a result of the pandemic, but I generally really appreciate brands who've sort of embraced in-store tech and digital technology and sort of made it a part of their brand strategy. I think a couple to name one of them would be Warby Parker. I think they've done a fabulous job integrating AR technology into their app, so that way when people are trying to purchase glasses, you can literally try on what they look like on your phone, which is great. The other thing that I've noticed, which has been insanely innovative, is Alibaba and their live streaming shopping services. I was reading this article and it said that they made about 280 million in 90 minutes, because people just love the idea of having people use products live and talk about it, because it makes it seem a lot more relatable. It's such a simple idea, but it's so smart, especially given the situation that we're in. And I think a brand that I've always really liked is Glossier. For one of the specific strategies that they use is contextualizing the store to the environment, which is really, really nice. And they sort of like take on the shape of the city that they open a pop-up in. And I think, that's highly appreciated by their customers.
Great. Yeah, they certainly, all of the brands you mentioned have really made a mark,
Mhm.
both in the physical as well as the digital world. So that's
Yeah.
great. Gissela, did you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I actually was thinking about Glossier too. I think one thing that I would also add to that is with Glossier, I really like how it's always about the experience there, and it kind of feels like a showroom rather than how much volume I can put in a store. And I think right now more than ever, retail is changing, and I think the one thing that remains constant is always the customer and their journey and their experience, because that's what is ultimately going to lead them to consume more from those brands and companies. And on another note too, one company in particular, Target, they really kind of changed their in-store and just kind of the collections that they have now, and just kind of bringing up what Emily said of what you're using for social media and like what are people doing. I think they really listened to that, and especially if you're watching Netflix, like the McGee Studio and just like Joanna Gaines and stuff, they have collections with them. And also, they really scrapped a lot of their main lines that they had and just kind of started from scratch and created partnerships and collaborations with other designers and companies to have more exclusive, kind of almost like a boutique experience, that in each part of the store you kind of experience different things that isn't just what you would typically see from Target. So turning something that's more of a daily errand that, hey, if you're running in just for something for groceries or something, you could find yourself in every season to find a different collection, which is kind of more if you are, especially during these times, just going in for essentials, it can still kind of create excitement that you see something new here and there if you are running in just really quickly.
Great, thanks so much. Yeah, it's interesting to me that you all identified specific retail brands that are playing in both the physical and the digital space really strongly. And I know that you're each in roles where you're currently identifying opportunities and creating connections for your clients or your followers and or your clients' customers in terms of either using the products or the spaces that you guys are developing. So where do you see the biggest opportunities for retail brands to better connect to their customers in the digital and physical spaces, or to have those two spaces talk more to each other? And let's start with Aditi this time.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like a lot of brands have, really started doing experiential branding. Like that's a huge thing now. I mean, because of the pandemic, I know there are limited opportunities, but I remember I was blown away by this brand called Recess, and I think their CBD infused drinks, but they had these amazing, beautiful pop-ups, and I think their slogan or their motto was, canned a feeling, and they literally turned that into a space, which is just such an amazing idea. So I feel like, even if your product is limiting in a certain way or serves a very specific purpose, I think making it spatial and digital in different ways is like a really smart way of connecting with people. Another brand that I've noticed do that was Reformation, even though it's a retail brand and they're selling clothes. They hold a lot of social gatherings and events in their store. This was obviously pre-pandemic. But I think that's really smart, even like using your retail space for purposes other than, just as a place for clothing inventory. So yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I love that you mentioned Recess. I think that their social media presence is incredible and that it's really very much emotion and aesthetic driven, and a really unique brand for people to keep their eye on.
Yeah.
Great. Emily, this is something that you're doing every day in terms of connecting the digital and the physical worlds and how those play together. So what are your thoughts on opportunities?
I think obviously like using the new social platforms to promote your product is something that a lot of companies are still scared to dive into because it's a more younger generation that they would be involving with as opposed to their typical consumer. But for me, I mean, obviously it was already mentioned, but the apps where you can try on the glasses and all of those things, like being able to connect the physical and the digital without actually needing the physical, at least at this point in time, and then transitioning that back into physical spaces. Like I forget which store it is, but I remember there is one location that is starting to have their location not even have any product, but it's just the experience, and then you can find the product through screens and try things on through screens. It's just like being able to transition back into the physical space without it just being your typical experience, and being able to bring like this experience that everyone's having during a pandemic where they are stuck in the digital age, being able to help them slowly move back into it without just being a shock.
Great. And Gissela, I know that you've worked in between a lot of these spaces as well. What are your thoughts on opportunities for retailers to further connect digital and physical?
Yeah, so one avenue to think about during all of this for retailers is thinking about every type of shopper. So there's still going to be shoppers that are still not going into stores or don't have the confidence to go in. So how do you still have that kind of experience online is really important. And also as far as this physical, to make people feel safe during these times. But I think the online portion is really important because sometimes people come in relying on that sales associate to help them with what they're looking for, especially when you think about beauty brands. So similar to what Emily mentioned with the sunglasses, there are now makeup companies that you can try on virtually what that makeup looks like. And they have shade finders now that are smart, that if you were to scan your phone through an app, you can figure out what shade that you would be for certain things, as well as using with the sample products as well. So it's how do you also sample things in a virtual space versus in a physical space? So how are you relaying that to your customers to try new products, essentially, because sometimes people try things in order to buy it. So I think looking at those kind of avenues for different retailers is an important aspect to look into, not necessarily specific companies, but just really as far as the experience and the value it comes to, as a customer, to walk through a physical space to figure out there what you want, and translating that to an online platform, I think is something that could really be developed and further research to help people out to have more confidence and be more comfortable in getting that to their door rather than going into the space.
That's great. I love too that you talked a lot about values and also how to make sure that you're engaging that cautious customer who is concerned about coming back in to a store physically. But again, I think looking at values and needs of your customers, that's something that you not only need to think of if you're a retail brand, but pivoting a little bit back to career exploration, that's something that you really need to figure out as well when you're looking for how to create synergy between, or find synergy between, an organization that you could see yourself building a career with, or in Emily's case, how to create synergy and shared values with your followers, and all of your brand partners as well. So in looking at whether it's your current position or a prior position or where you hope to be in the future, how have you each gone about recognizing where an alignment between values are? And I guess, how important is that to you? Do you think that that's high on the level of importance in terms of figuring out where you want to be and where your next steps in your career are? Gissela, I'll throw this one out to you first.
Yeah. So I think really just evaluating your goals and what you want for yourself, I think is really the first step in that, of where do you want to see yourself? How do you want to grow? What are the ways in which you want to learn? And I think identifying those factors first really help you try to figure out that that's how you would like to work, and where that leads you as far as the companies that you research or that you apply to. Because it's not always about the types of projects and what you do on a daily basis, but also how you're fulfilling yourself to be happy, and that kind of culture and that work environment. And I think great synergies happen when your goals align with the company's goals and that you feel valued at your workplace. So just really looking for how your goals really resonate with that company's and how they help you to reach those goals. And actually being listened to and having transparent communication with your company as well goes hand in hand. And I think just really finding the values within yourself should also reflect on how you work in the places that you apply to, and try to, not even just where you work to, but how you spend your time as well. So it's always kind of going back to what Rachel was saying about those energy givers. So what really fuels you, and how and what will get you to be your best self, is really how, not just professionally, but just really personally as well.
Great. Aditi, how about you? I know that you've recently started a new position so this is something that's probably very top of mind for you.
Yeah, I think, this is a question that everyone who's in school or even after should definitely think about. The end goal shouldn't just be, how do I get a job in my field? It should be, what makes me happy? What is something I'm willing to do for the rest of my life? What makes me happy when I do it for 8 hours a day repeatedly? And, like, what kind of people do I want to work with? And at the end of the day, like, how am I keeping my mind productive, right? So when I ask myself those questions and compare it to, what I was doing as an architect, I kind of realized that I really like visual storytelling. That was a priority to me, and it was very fulfilling. I like feeling like I'm making a direct impact. So, just getting user feedback and understanding how my design work is affecting somebody is very important to me. So those are like things that I prioritized when I was sort of looking for a career. And also, even people that I'm working with at Toast, it's a very cross-functional team. Almost everybody comes from a diverse background. And, just working in the tech industry is very new to me, but I also really like it. So, just like identifying things that are personally satisfying can make it extremely clear as to what you would want to do. So yeah, like my experience so far has been very, very positive.
That's great.
Yeah.
And Emily, you have, in addition to finding professional value with the brand collaborations that you're working on, you also have the unique experience of needing to create a value proposition and a value exchange with all of your followers as well. So can you talk a little bit about that and how important that is to you?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things to note is that although you may have values that you think should be attached to your career, you might have other personal values that end up taking over those other values. So for me in architecture and in design school, I feel like there was definitely a life path that almost everyone valued, and nobody really questioned it. Nobody questioned the different avenues, even though there are so many different avenues you can do with an interior design career that people just don't really look into. So for me, it was recognizing that I have different values. I have a hard work ethic value, and I also have a value of helping others and being able to help those who may not necessarily be able to have the more expensive design experience or be able to have access to an education in design. So for me, it was kind of making that switch of, I have this value. I love working on commercial design spaces. I love being able to make grand designs and be a part of that. But also at the same time, I have this other value where there are people who are now looking up to me and would like to hear what I have to share with them. So it was definitely switching those values and also helping people understand the different values that come with interior design, and how it can help your mental health and how it can just transform your life, even if you don't really know it. And just having a space that surrounds you that is meant for you and that's built for you and that you feel like you have control over is definitely something that I think the majority of the population doesn't understand the benefits of. So for me, it was really doing a transition of values and also sharing those values with other people so that they can understand the benefits that their life could have from design and architecture. And yeah.
That's great. Now, I think that's so important. I think that goes back to the importance of being able to learn how to pitch your ideas and learn how to frame them so that people can hear what it is you have to say and can internalize that and then understand how that can impact their lives as well. So that's wonderful. Just building a little bit more on this alignment of personal and professional values, and more importantly, knowing your own value. What do you value most about the opportunity in your own career path? Kind of looking a little bit more towards the future. What brings you the most personal satisfaction as you think about your career now and where you're going to be going in 5 to 10 years? And Emily, maybe we'll start with you just to continue on that discussion or the thread you were going down.
Yeah, so I have a bunch of things that inspire me with this new profession that I previously didn't know existed. But for me, I definitely think being able to mold what I want for myself is something that I didn't necessarily ever view as a future for me. I definitely was set in learning from my higher ups and being able to grow up in the ladder, and that's something that I had taken away from me, and am now kind of teaching myself along the way. And I think still being able to connect with other people and hearing people's stories. I have people who are messaging me all of these just stories about their life that are just so jaw-dropping and telling me that one of my projects inspired them to do the same thing. And so definitely for me, the main motivation is hearing those stories and connecting with people who didn't necessarily know that design could help them with their life. And obviously another motivating factor for me that is something that I love is that I can make my own schedule. So for me, I decide when I want to do certain things, I decide what I want to be doing, and then I do it. And it's not your typical work strategy. And it's definitely something that's been uncomfortable for me to latch onto, but having this opportunity, having this leeway, and also connecting with all of these people has been something that is just extremely motivating for me and makes me want to keep doing it.
Great, thank you. Gissela, do you want to take on that question next?
Yeah. With everything that's going on, I think even more now than ever, I just really value that relationship with the client to meet their goals. And as those goals change a little bit during the pandemic, I think finding those solutions, because design is evolving every day. So I think with the pandemic that's going on right now, has really challenged us to rethink the spaces that we've always designed, that we try to do forward thinking, but kind of on that next level. So what I really value and what I love is kind of that creative process of how you collaborate with your team and how you collaborate with your client, because that relationship alone can be really strong through learning strategies and how to pitch your own ideas within the clients, and how that kind of pivots how their clients experience their spaces. So something that for me that is a really good motivator is how to positively impact their experience, them being the client, and as well as having my clients be successful as well. So that entire path of just having that really good relationship with your team and your client can create really successful projects and products. So during this entire process of kind of being thrown, okay, how do we navigate through these unprecedented experiences has been a fun challenge. And I think it's something that kind of helps us become better designers within that, and just to create and solve better solutions that can actually stay for the long run outside of all of this. That kind of made us think outside the box to create more inventive solutions. So just overall working with the people that you create with and who that impacts is really what motivates me.
That's great. So I think Emily and Gissela both talked in different ways, but both about relationships and that idea of personal and professional impact, you know, as being something that's really important. Aditi, what are some of your thoughts on what brings you the most personal satisfaction?
Yeah, I think, we're all designers because we're very user-centric people. So, when you see your design have an impact on somebody else, whether, it's through TikTok or interior design or even like the digital realm, it's really satisfying when something you do is making someone's day easier or like a task more intuitive. And to me, that is actually really rewarding. And the way I look at it, it's sort of one of the reasons I was drawn to design as a whole is because it's actually an educational tool. You're always communicating something or trying to represent someone or an idea. So like specifically, to what I'm doing at Toast when, I'm designing screens that are going to make restaurants, they're going to make a task easier for them to perform. Like that in itself is like really rewarding to me, especially given that we're in a pandemic and the hospitality industry isn't doing that well. It could be, literally as small as someone filling out a form in under 5 seconds. They can do it faster now, and maybe it took them 30 minutes before. It's things like that that are really rewarding when they're sort of tangible and making people's lives easier.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw this back over to the PAVE Executive Director, Dash, who I think has been monitoring the Q&A to see if there are any questions that have come in for our panelists.
Yes, so we do have,
I think I saw one question come in so far.
So there, sorry, I was looking at the wrong icon and
Don't
it looked
worry,
like my
we
computer
all
was
have
still on mute.
monitors. Yeah.
I know. I was looking at Nikki's screen. I'm like, why is my red microphone not going away? So yeah, we do have one question come in, but anybody else still on the chat, feel free to type your questions in and we'll get to those. So for Emily, you are in a unique position where you have attained a social media following of over 3.5 million people, clearly making you an influencer, and you have built a powerful professional network through PAVE with your involvement. Have you thought of any strategies to combine these assets to further advance your career?
So I love working with other students. I think education is the most important part. So I love doing anything with PAVE. I actually met PAVE when I was a sophomore in college because they had a design competition, and me and a friend of mine were able to go to Chicago for Global Shop with them with a design. So, and that honestly was one of the most inspiring things that I experienced while I was in school. So I think that working with students is so important. I'm actually currently partnered with TikTok for the TikTok Creative Learning Fund. So my content on TikTok is specifically right now educational, to help people who are interested in interior design or just learning more about it. So I definitely think that my future has different connections between student learning, which is funny because I never wanted to be a teacher. I never wanted to be a professor. But having these different avenues kind of come together for me is definitely something that I think is going to continue to grow now that I'm both partnered with TikTok and also involved with different student organizations. There's definitely some connections that could be made in the future.
And we've got, what advice, and this can be to anybody, what advice do you have for students currently in school who are seeking a career in retail design? Does anybody want to take that approach of what they can do to kind of keep their skills sharp and to be prepared for a career in retail design?
Aditi, I'm not sure if you want to, I know you and I had talked a little bit about that in terms of how to keep skills sharp for people who, want to have a future career in retail design, as you were kind of exploring different avenues as you were deciding to make the leap to product designer. I know you were really looking at that topic as well.
Yeah, something that I was exploring, and it's actually relevant to everyone, is just, how to integrate tech into retail. I think that's going to be increasingly a lot more important now, especially, with retail, especially digital retail doing incredibly well. I think there's a large scope, to explore ideas where you can turn retail ideas into mobile applications or web platforms. I think that would be like an area to explore.
All right, so we've got another one that can be open to multiple people. And we can start with Emily on this one, and then we'll move to anyone else. How do you see your career developing over the next 5 to 10 years?
My career is crazy right now. I used to set goals for what exactly would be happening, what dates things would happen for me. But I've kind of learned recently that you kind of just have to take things as they come. Right now, for me personally, I don't actually think that I'll be ever going back into a firm, but you never know. I'm never going to say never. But for me, I have been able to do design work for other influencers and celebrities behind the scenes. And I have been partnered with TikTok and other apps to create educational content. And now I'm working with brands as well who want me to pay me to promote their product. And it's just kind of like this really interesting gauge for me of all of the different aspects that I can organize and can just get my creative juices flowing to be able to solve all these different problems. And it's growing every day for me. So right now, personally, I see myself still doing this in 5 years. But like I said, never say never, never have a set plan for yourself like that, because you never really know what's going to happen, and you kind of can't take things with disappointment. You have to just continue pushing forward and be excited about what you have as an opportunity.
Does anyone else want to tackle that question? All right. So we've got another question. Would you suggest applying for various types of design work, whether it be hospitality, retail, residential, just for the experience, even though you have a certain passion? I know these are tough times, and it's harder to go with a job that really aligns with your values.
100%. I think any experience will be valuable regardless, because you may know your passion now, but saying yes to an opportunity could actually lead you to a new passion. Or especially during these times, if you're not super excited about something, but it's still something, I think by taking the right approach of a good attitude to see what you can learn from that, I think is really valuable, because knowing what you love and what your passion is also important to know what you don't like and so that you are aware of what you don't want to do. So I think regardless, any experience kind of helps you mold and shape that for yourself, as regardless of what kind of career path or what you see yourself in 5 to 10 years. But saying yes to opportunities is really, you'd never know what could happen and where those opportunities could lead you. And just saying yes to a job that may not align to your passions now isn't to say that it could actually lead you there. I think any sort of contact in any job can actually help you get to the next step, or actually could introduce you to somebody that could lead you to your passion. So I think looking at both sides of the spectrum could be really beneficial.
I would just like to add, I think it's really important to keep pursuing personal projects. You know, you don't always have to have a prompt from school or just do what you have to do at your work. Like if you're really passionate about something and you want to combine two ideas that no one has ever explored, I think you should do it. Like build that app, that space, that illustration poster, whatever it is, and you know, send it out to people or like talk to your friends about it. I think that in itself helps people discover what they really want to do and what they genuinely like. And yeah, I think that's it.
I appreciate it. That's about all the time we have. So I wanted to thank everyone. I know, Rachel, you've got a couple closing messages, but I wanted to thank you all for taking the time to do this and for everyone who was in attendance.
Great. Yes. Thank you to Emily, Aditi, and Gissela for joining us. And I also just want to let people know that, you know, together with PAVE, Bergmeyer has recently launched our 2020 scholarship, which is a $1,500 scholarship for students with, unfortunately, not an in-person experience in the spring, because we're all still waiting to see when things are going to open up, but a wonderful virtual mentoring experience in the spring. So we thank PAVE for everything that they do for students and emerging professionals, and for our wonderful panelists for giving their time and sharing their thoughts on the retail industry and building a career with us today. So thank you so much. I think that's it. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Yeah, thank you so much
you.
for organizing this. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.